Welcome back to Hexes, Haunts, and Howls. I'm your host, Cupcake. Today is episode 10 of the Cryptid Files, a series where we explore the creatures that lurk on the edges of folklore and fear. Tonight's episode is a little different. We're not just chasing one cryptid, we're chasing two, tangled together in myth and mystery. On one side, mermaids, the ocean's enchanting, sometimes benevolent figures. On the other, sirens, deadly songstresses of legend, luring sailors to their doom. Some say they're two names for the same creature. Others insist they're entirely different, separated by centuries of stories, cultures, and imagination. By the end of this episode, we'll explore the myths, the sightings, and the eerie accounts that blur the line between beauty and danger, and leave you wondering, what really swims beneath the waves? The sea was calm that night, deceptively calm. A lone fisherman, old, weathered hands gripping the tiller, drifted beyond the safe lights of the harbor. The moon hung low, a silver sliver cutting through the mist. And then he heard it, a voice, soft, methodic, almost impossibly beautiful. Not from any human he'd ever known. It floated across the water, drawing him closer, tugging at something deep in his chest. He didn't fully understand what was going on. He squinted into the dark swells. Something moved beneath the waves, just at the edge of sight. A pale shimmer, like moonlight on skin. The figure lingered, half hidden, fleeting, as though the ocean itself was shaping it. Was it a mermaid? The kind whispered about in taverns? Mysterious, sometimes kind, sometimes mischievous? Or a siren, the deadly songstress of legend, luring sailors to watery graves? He didn't know, and as he leaned closer to the sound, the water around the boat rippled unnaturally. The singing grew louder, and then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence. Empty waves. The fisherman would swear he'd seen something watching him. Waiting. Something that wasn't human. But neither fully animal. Something that belonged to the stories people told late at night. Tonight, we're diving into that mystery. Mermaids and sirens. Are they two sides of the same coin? Or entirely different creatures, separated by centuries of myth and fear, beauty and danger, myth and reality? And somewhere, deep in the waves, the line between the two might be thinner than you think. When we think of mermaids, most of us picture the same image. A beautiful woman with a shimmering tail, singing in the waves. But across centuries and continents, the story has taken many forms. In Europe, mermaids often appeared in folklore as omens, sometimes helpful, sometimes dangerous. In Scandinavian tales, the Hayfru could warn sailors of storms or lead them to treasure if they treated her with respect. Ignore her, and the sea would claim your ship. One story tells of a fisherman in Norway who glimpsed a mermaid combing her golden hair atop a rock. He tried to call her, mesmerized, But the wind shifted suddenly. Waves rose, and his small boat capsized. Some say the mermaid saved him. Some say she orchestrated the whole disaster. The line was always thin. Across Africa, the Mamiwata spirits represent another face of the mermaid archetype. Often depicted as part human, part fish, sometimes with snakes, they were worshipped or feared. In coastal villages, fishermen could offer gifts to Mamiwata, hoping for protection and fortune. For those who disrespected her, told by local legends, might never return from the waters. One tale tells of a man who tried to capture a glimpse of her reflection in the river at night. The next day, his nets were empty, his boat mysteriously overturned, and the villagers whispered she had chosen her own lesson. Moving east to Asia, Japanese folklore gives us a ningyo, a creature sometimes described as a fish with a human face. Eating its flesh was said to grant longevity, but at a terrible cost. Storms, famine, or death would follow. Sailors feared the ningyo, not just for its mystery, but for its power to influence the human world. A reminder that the ocean held forces beyond comprehension. Now, sirens. Their origin is far older, steeped in Greek myth. Unlike mermaids, the earliest depictions show them as half bird, half woman, perched on rocky cliffs. Their allure wasn't about beauty alone. It was their song, haunting and irresistible. Homer tells of Odysseus, who plugged his crew's ears with wax and had himself tied to the mast to survive their call. The sirens promised knowledge, pleasure, and delight. But those promises hid destruction. Over time, as myths traveled and evolved, sirens began to appear more like mermaids, swimming instead of perched, tail replacing wings. Yet their intent stayed deadly: charm, lure, and kill. So when we compare mermaids and sirens, patterns emerge. Mermaids are often alluring, human-like, sometimes part animal, depending on culture. Sirens started winged, bird-like, and later became fish-tailed. Mermaids range from helpful to mischievous. Sirens are almost always dangerous. Mermaids can test morality or reward respect. Sirens exist to trick. Across continents, from Norway to Africa to Japan, humans have imagined mysterious water beings, creatures that command the waves and the imagination. Some bring luck, some bring death, but all are bound to the ocean, its unpredictability, and its secrets. And while their forms are different, there's one thread connecting them. The ocean has always been a place of mystery and danger, and we've always projected our fears and desires onto it. Mermaids and sirens have haunted human imagination for centuries. But what about the people who actually claim to see them? In 1542, Christopher Columbus and his crew were sailing near the coast of what is now the Dominican Republic. In his journal, Columbus wrote the sightings of 3 mermaids rising from the water. He described them as not quite as beautiful as the stories said, more human than fish, almost ugly in the face. Yet the sailors were entranced, staring for hours as the creature swam alongside the ship. Some historians argue Columbus may have seen manatees or dugongs, but for the crew, weary after weeks at sea, it might have been something else entirely. Across the Atlantic, in the early 1600s, John Smith, exploring the Chesapeake Bay, reported water women who would appear near his boats, shimmering and pale, glimpsed in the mist. The locals called them spirits of the river, warning that any who mocked or chased them might vanish or be caught in a sudden storm. Smith's records were ambiguous, but the whispers among sailors and settlers were consistent. Strange, human-like figures lingering along the shoreline, watching, waiting. The Mediterranean had its own tales. Shiplogs from the 17th and 18th centuries warn of the siren song off rocky cliffs near the Strait of Messina. Mariners described hearing music in the dead of night, soft and impossible to locate. Some claim ships ran aground or disappeared entirely, victims of sirens' hypnotic pull. Ancient maritime maps even marked "Here be sirens" in small, cautionary notes. For sailors, it was more than superstition. It was survival advice. But sightings didn't stop with history. Into the 20th century, there were reports that still unsettle investigators. In 1948, a group of fishermen off the coast of New Guinea claimed to see large humanoid figures gliding in the water at dusk. It had a shimmering, scaly tail, long flowing hair, and most unsettling, eyes that reflected the moonlight unnaturally. They reported it watching them for several minutes before disappearing beneath the waves. More recently, in 2012, a woman snorkeling off the coast of the Bahamas filmed what she described as a figure with a human-like upper body and a long, flowing tail, darting beneath the water, too fast to identify. Marine biologists dismissed it as a manatee, or optical illusion, but she insists it was something else, something alive, intelligent, and aware of her presence. Across centuries, from Columbus's weary crew to modern divers, a pattern emerges. Humans see these beings at the edges of perception, fleeting, impossible to capture, yet impossible to forget. And whether it's a mermaid or a siren, or some creature we have yet to understand, the sightings continue to blur the line between legend and reality. Of course, not every tale of mermaids or sirens needs to be supernatural. Science offers explanations, but even these are often as strange and haunting as the legends themselves. Take manatees and dugongs, for example. Columbus's ugly mermaids. Most historians now think he saw manatees, large, slow-moving mammals with human-like faces. and flippers. Seen from a distance, in choppy seas, and through the haze of longing and fatigue, they could appear almost human. Sailors at sea for weeks, sleep-deprived, often stretched the mind to see something familiar or terrifying in the unknown. Then, there are the optical illusions and environmental tricks. Fog, moonlight on waves, reflections of jellyfish or ice, even floating seaweed, all can create shapes that resemble arms, hair, or a tail. The ocean is a master of disguise, a shifting liquid mirror that can fool the eye and the mind. Even the human brain itself plays a role. Psychologists note that humans are wired to detect faces and patterns, even where none exist. Sailors, isolated and anxious, often projected stories into ambiguous shapes, transforming a distant wave into a watching figure, a splash into a tail flicking beneath the water. Fear shapes perception, making the impossible seem real. And these factors feed cultural persistence. Once a story is told, it spreads, passed down for generations, reinterpreted by artists, writers, and travelers. The Hafru in Scandinavia, Mami Wata in Africa, Ningyao in Japan, or Sirens in the Mediterranean. These tales adapted to local fears, desires, and morality lessons. A cautionary tale in one village becomes a warning of doom in another, yet all are tied to the same unknowable depth. Even today, science and folklore coexist uneasily. A diver may dismiss a shadow in the water as a seal or a manatee, but the emotion of that encounter lingers. That lingering doubt, that edge of fear and fascination, is exactly why mermaids and sirens remain so compelling. They are myths shaped by reality, and reality shaped by myth, swimming just beneath the line of understanding. So while we can chart and study the seas, measure tides, and catalog marine life, some stories resist explanation. Some figures still glide just out of reach, leaving us wondering if the ocean's deepest mysteries are not entirely ours to know. When we think about mermaids today, most of us picture something soft, magical, even safe. That image, it didn't just happen. It was carefully built. Take the Little Mermaid. Bright red hair, seashell tops, singing about love and freedom. That version of mermaids became the default for an entire generation. Harmless, curious, dreamy. But here's the thing. That's not what mermaids started as. Long before Disney softened them, these beings were much closer to what we'd call sirens. Dangerous, manipulative, and often deadly. And lately, pop culture has been drifting back toward that darker version. Look at the shows like Siren, where mermaids aren't whimsical at all. They're predatory, territorial, and unapologetically violent. Or movies like The Lighthouse, where the mermaid figure is less of a character and more of a haunting, something that lingers just out of reach, pulling at the mind. Even in literature, the shift is obvious. Into the Drowning Deep reimages mermaids as deep-sea hunters, creatures that evolved to lure humans the same way anglers use light. Just enough beauty to draw you in before it's too late. So, now we have two versions coexisting. One that sings, and one that waits. And then there's the internet. If you've ever gone down a late night rabbit hole, you've probably seen them. Grainy clips, distant shapes in the water, something moving just a little too intentionally beneath the surface. Mermaid sightings. A lot of these videos go viral. People claim to see figures perched on rocks, slipping beneath waves, or even swimming unnaturally fast just below boats. Some are clearly hoaxes, some are clever edits, but not all of them are so easy to explain. What makes these videos so unsettling isn't just what you see, it's what you don't. The distance, the blur, the way the figure disappears right before you fully understand what you're looking at. It taps into something ancient. The same fear sailors once had, staring into open water, knowing something could be watching, just out of sight. And whether people believe in them or not, they keep watching, sharing, zooming in frame by frame, trying to prove or disprove what's there. Because a small part of us still wonders, what if? Then there's mermaid tourism. Because yes, that is a very real thing. Places all over the world have leaned into this legend. You can visit attractions where performers dress as mermaids and swim in massive tanks, interacting with guests like they're part of another world. One of the most famous examples is Weeki Wachee Springs State Park, where live mermaid shows have been running since the 1940s. It's beautiful, nostalgic, almost surreal, but it also does something else. It keeps the myth alive. Gift shops sell mermaid tales. Towns build identities around sightings. Coastal areas share stories passed down through generations, sometimes half joking, sometimes not. And over time, the line between performance and belief starts to blur. Because when a place tells a story long enough, it becomes part of its identity. So today, mermaids and sirens exist in this strange place. They're in children's movies and horror novels. They're in staged performances and unexplained videos. There's something we dress up as, and something we're still, deep down, a little afraid of. And maybe that's why they've never disappeared. Because they have adapted. Soft when we want wonder, dark when we crave fear. Always just believable enough to keep us looking at the water a little longer than we should. Mermaids and sirens have fascinated humans for centuries. But one of the biggest questions is, are they actually the same creature, just interpreted differently across time and culture? Some researchers argue that these beings could be a single cryptid, a mysterious aquatic species that humans have consistently misidentified. Across the world, stories vary. Greek sirens lure sailors to their deaths. Scandinavian mermaids warn of storms. Caribbean mermaids appear as portents of fortune or doom. Could all of these legends stem from encounters with this same elusive being, seen through the lens of local culture and imagination? Then, there's the question of the sightings themselves. Are they purely natural explanations? Manatees, seals, bioluminescent fish? Or do they hint at something beyond our understanding? Some theorists suggest certain encounters, particularly those at dawn or dusk when the light is low, could be supernatural in nature. A being that exists just out of the human perception, part of the natural world, yet outside the ordinary. And here's where it gets truly chilling. Imagine you're on a quiet beach at night. The water is still. You see movement beneath the surface. A shape just long enough to glimpse it before it disappears. It seems to know you're watching. What if some of these creatures have been observing humans all along, never fully revealing themselves, but always learning, always waiting, just beneath the waves? Whether they are myth, misidentification, or something else entirely, one thing remains certain. Mermaids and sirens continue to captivate our imagination, challenging our understanding of the natural and the unknown. As we wrap up today's journey into the waters of myth and reality, take a moment to imagine the ocean in its deepest, quietest moments. Beneath the waves lies a world we barely glimpse, full of creatures both known and unknown, some gentle, some dangerous, and some that may exist entirely beyond our understanding. Think about the stories we've explored. The mermaids of Disney, the dark sirens of legend, the fleeting glimpses recorded in history and modern reports. There's a common thread: the unknown. That tension beneath beauty and danger, curiosity and fear. It's what keeps these tales alive. And so the question lingers. The ocean is vast, deep, full of life we may never understand. Are some songs meant to lure us or to warn us? If you've ever experienced something strange, unexplained, or uncanny in our world, consider sharing it. Your story could be part of the next episode, diving even deeper into the mysteries that surround us. You can submit your stories to hexes, haunts, and howls at gmail.com. Again, that's hexes, haunts, and howls, all one word, at gmail.com. All stories will remain anonymous. Thank you for listening to Hexes, Haunts, and Howls. I'm your host, Cupcake. Until next time, stay sweet.